Burning witches was a cottage industry in early New England. Accusations would spread like wildfire, fueled by paranoia, religious fervor, and plain old malice. For some desperate souls, being accused was a death sentence. For others, it was a way out. When they thought they ended her, they thought fire could silence the whispers. But they didn't know who Elira was. They should have known better than to try to kill her twice. When the flames rose, she became the ember. And the ember is all that remains after a witch has given up her life. The memory of her life force, bound to those who wronged her and passed down through bloodline, generation after generation, until one day the balance tips and she is returned. Let me tell you the story of Elira. Elira is not a character from a book. She is a character from a story that can only be told by firelight. When the villagers built their pyre, they figured Elira was dead already. By the time the sun rose, the only evidence that she'd ever been there was a faint smell of wood smoke and the shadow of a charred corpse. But that was just what they wanted. That's what they meant to see. What they didn't see was a girl watching from the trees, an ember growing inside her chest. For 3 days, she stayed in the trees, listening to the villagers below go about their lives. For 3 weeks, she stayed in the forest, watching the fields where she used to play. For 3 months, she roamed the land, gathering her strength, waiting for the right moment to strike back. And when she finally descended on Eldenmoor, the villagers knew that she was back. When the moon turned red, crimson, full, still, their first instinct was to lock their doors. But it was summer. Who would be foolish enough to come calling on such a warm night? And who would come calling at all? She had friends who watched over the village. As the night wore on, more and more candles flickered for no reason. Dogs whined and howled at nothing, and people dared not speak her name. But she heard them. She heard the whispers behind closed doors, saw the prayers written on window panes, felt the terror that gripped their hearts. And she laughed, because now she knew the villagers were hers again, body and soul. She was more powerful this way, more terrible, freer even. She could be anyone and anywhere. She could touch them, taste their fear, hear their secrets. But she was still Elira. Even if no one remembered her, even if no one believed she'd ever existed, she knew who she was. She had to. She had no choice. But who was Elira? Why had the villagers put her to death in the first place? Well, let me start at the beginning. The village of Eldenmoor sat nestled between rolling hills and an ancient forest. Life there was uncomplicated, peaceful even, except for the threat posed by the wilderness, by wolves and bears and whatever else lurked in the trees. Everyone knew their place in town. They farmed the land, hunted what little game they needed, and traded for other necessities with the neighboring villages. They prayed at the chapel on Sundays and tried to ignore the fact that so many men left to fight in distant wars. Most of the time, it was enough. And then Elira came along. No one knows where or how she came to Eldenmoor, only that she arrived in the late spring with a small traveling troupe and set up camp just outside the village. Unlike the others, Elira stayed behind once the show was over, taking a job at the tavern instead. The townspeople didn't mind having her around. After all, it's not like she was much different from them. She helped out at the general store, attended church services, sat on the benches during town hall meetings. No one paid much attention to her until trouble came to Eldenmoor. That summer, the crops began to fail. Farmers woke up to find their livestock slaughtered, their barns burned to the ground. Food and supplies started to dwindle, forcing the villagers to make a long journey to the nearest market. People grew desperate. They argued in the street, stopped speaking to each other. Rumors spread. Superstitions took hold. They needed a scapegoat, someone to blame for their problems, and they found her. Elira was different. She didn't go to church. She didn't attend town hall meetings. She wouldn't help neighbors whose pigs had just been butchered. She kept to herself, staying in her little house on the outskirts of town, stirring strange concoctions in copper kettles. What's more, she seemed pleased when the crops failed and the food ran low. So naturally, the villagers went to Father Garrison, the most devout man in town, and asked him to look into Elira. Was she a witch? Hadn't they read the scriptures? Didn't they know the dangers of witchcraft? The answer was yes, but their faith didn't stop them from worrying. And when Father German confirmed their suspicions, the villagers lost whatever sliver of their minds they had left. He didn't understand why they'd come to him. Of course, she was a witch. Just look at her. All you had to do was spend 5 minutes in her company, and you could feel the evil pouring off of her. He had tried to warn them before, But sometimes people just don't want to hear the truth. On the night of August, a mob gathered outside Elira's house. They demanded she come outside so they could take her to the chapel. She just laughed, hid in her room, and waited for them to break down her door. When they finally did, they found her kneeling by her hearth. Her head snapped up, and for the first time, they saw her eyes. They were coal black, bottomless pits of nothingness. Before they could scream, she was upon them. She fought like a wild animal, clawing and biting. She fought like a wraith, ethereal and swift, appearing and disappearing at will. She fought like a witch, powerful and terrifying. But it wasn't enough. There were too many of them. Finally, exhausted, cornered, desperate, she fled into the forest, the villagers hot on her heels. She doesn't remember what happened next. She remembers pain, an excruciating, burning pain, and then nothing. What the villagers found in the morning was a pile of ash. They gathered around, careful not to disturb it, and began to pray. Some thanked God, others begged for forgiveness. None stayed long enough to watch the sunrise, and that's how Elira died. Or rather, that's how the villagers thought she died. In reality, she had retreated deep into the forest, taken shelter in the roots of an ancient oak, and survived. 14 years passed. The crops returned to Eldenmoor. Children played in the streets again, and no one spoke of the woman they burned. That was, of course, until the moon turned red, crimson, full still. Finnegan Tremaine was a dreamer. While other children played knights and squires, he pretended he was exploring uncharted lands, fighting fearsome beasts and meeting strange new people. He loved stories. He devoured every book in the local library, heard every tale the traveling storytellers brought with them, learned every legend the villagers shared around their fires. That's why when the moon turned a deep crimson and shadows stretched long across the valley, he wasn't afraid when he heard a voice call his name. He knew it was only the wind whispering through the trees, but the wind was wrong. As soon as Finn left the safety of his home, the whispers grew louder. The trees themselves seemed to reach out and grab him, pulling him deeper and deeper into their protective embrace. He couldn't turn back. Fear turned his legs to lead. Panic choked his throat. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. Instead, he fell to his knees and pressed his palms against the cold earth. Then he looked up. A smile spread across his face. He recognized the clearing. He'd been here before, or at least he thought he had. The tall oak loomed overhead, its branches gnarled and twisted. Beneath it lay a path of fresh ash, and in front of him stood a face. It wasn't his mother's nor his father's, nor any face he'd ever seen before. It was beautiful, framed by tangled, messy hair, framed by skin the color of burnished copper, framed by eyes that shone like polished onyx. But what struck Finn the most was the woman's smile. It was wide and genuine and full of warmth. "Hello, child," she said. "This is the story of Elira the Ember. If you like this kind of content, check out my podcast, where I explore folklore from around the world. Thanks for listening. See you next time."